Hello, everybody. We're so glad you've joined us today for our Body, Soul, and Spirit podcast. We've been talking about happiness, what happiness is not. So we are going to conclude our podcast on happiness. And we've been talking about how happiness is not a destination, but it's a journey, a road that we all choose to get on that requires all of our parts, body, our soul, our emotions, our mind. It's intentional. It's something that we choose to do. It's something that we choose to do daily. We also spoke about some myths. And today I want to conclude those myths that we've maybe often have told ourselves, and it could be subconsciously. It's not something necessarily that's in the front part of our mind where we think happiness is. We don't necessarily say these things. They're not necessarily conscious, but there's sometimes these small little voices, small little suggestions that are called myths. Myths that we have about happiness. Myths that makes us believe that if I have, or if I do, or if only, then I'm going to be happy. So we've been really just targeting these myths to make sure that none of us have these thoughts, these suggestions, these ways of thinking or belief systems that are really putting us in a trap. And they're really taking us to unhappiness. It's possible for us to think that something is going to take us to happiness when in fact, it's only going to lead us to unhappiness. So we talked about different myths. And the one that I want to talk about first is the myth that says, I'm going to be happy if I just avoid all these negative emotions. I'm going to find happiness if I can just ignore the feeling of, if I can just put it aside and not think about it, if I could just maybe push it off to the side. And we talked a little bit about it last time, but this is something that oftentimes we find in people that really are trying to move in a direction where they want to build maybe a relationship with God. This is something that I personally have seen in my own faith walk. And we see it, people that maybe go to church and they want to, read their Bible and they want to live this godly life, which is great. And we should seek that our bodies, we're a makeup of body, soul, and spirit as well. So that's important. However, I think that sometimes we can fall into the trap of pretending like we are not going to experience these negative emotions. For example, like doubt. If I don't experience doubt, then I'm just going to be happy. If I don't ever feel doubt, then I'm going to be happy. And what ends up happening oftentimes is the reality of our five senses, right? That doubt sometimes wants to creep in. And when we suppress or ignore these feelings, whether it's sadness or anger or grief, and we really try to avoid about thinking about these thoughts, we sometimes think that we're going to get happy. But what we don't understand is that negative emotions, negative feelings, they are a part of our makeup. And I don't think we could ever grow. I don't think we could ever evolve or develop or even heal if we keep and continue to stuff, if we keep and continue to ignore, or we just put it off to the side or suppress. These emotions that we tend to suppress never lead us to a healed us. It never leads us to a greater degree of happiness. When you think about these feelings like sadness or grief or anger or doubt, they really allow you to move in a direction that could lead you to healing, that could lead you to growth, because it tells you things about you and what's happening within you. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that if I never have a negative emotion, then that's leading me to happiness. That's not necessarily true. You're going to have some negative emotions. Somebody might upset you. Somebody might cut you off on the road that leads you to anger. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're not on the road to happiness. But listen for those emotions. What's going on inside of your emotions? What is that anger trying to tell you? Where is it really coming from? And rather than looking at it from a perspective of, I don't want to feel that, I'm just going to avoid it. I'm going to push it aside. Learn from it. Why is it there? Ask those questions in a healthy way. Sometimes people think that if they only had a better life, or if they only had a life that was like so-and-so, and we begin to compare ourselves and our lives to other people. But I want you to think about for a moment, God gave you your life. It's your story. And with that comes the good, the bad, and the ugly. And oftentimes when we compare ourselves, we think that the grass is greener on the other side, when in fact, that grass has to be cut as well. So that's a myth. It's important for us to understand that if we're going to be on this journey to happiness, we cannot numb. We can't avoid any of these maybe even difficulties or bad emotions. No, we can't ignore things. We can't avoid things. We can't blame. We can't excuse. We can't compare. We can't shame ourselves. That is not the road to happiness. You have the power to move the needle in a direction of happiness. That is within your control. The choices that you make daily, the things that you choose to meditate on, give you an opportunity to move towards happiness. It's something that's it's something that's going to fall from the sky. It's when you're struggling, when you're having a difficulty, you have the power and the control within you to invite God to that difficulty, to invite God even to that struggle. That takes a lot of courage. And to move in a direction where you say, no, I'm not going to avoid, I'm not going to compare, I'm not going to blame or excuse or avoid traps, right, that lead me to pretending like nothing's there, or numbing or shaming or isolating, right? That's never, I choose not to do that. That's within our control. So in reality, happiness is a journey that we choose to get on. And that requires courage. And that requires a lot of other categories. Let's talk about those categories for a moment. There are categories and there's strategies to put us on a happiness path. This is not instant gratification. Instant gratification, if only I buy this, I'm going to be happy. That instant gratification is only going to lead us to unhappiness. But the path towards happiness is really a series of intentional steps, step by step. It's one step. And number one, connection. So let me summarize this. If we're going to be on the road to happiness, we need to take steps towards connection. Connection will always move that needle towards happiness. We were created as humans to connect with others. We were never created to be isolated. Human connection leads us to a road of happiness. So if you want to get on this journey of happiness, then you should pick up the phone, take a step, pick up the phone, call a friend, go for a walk with a friend, show up to church, go and join groups, serve, stop being isolated, but take steps towards friendships, healthy connections. The Bible and science teaches this, that connection is key. It's key to healing. It's key to your own well-being. So take the necessary, those are brave steps. And when you begin to move towards the path of happiness, it takes courage. Resistance and fear are never going to lead you to happiness. But taking those small steps and really looking within, what is going on? What is this emotion that I feel? I'm not going to push it away. I'm not going to ignore it, but I really want to know where it's coming from. Those are steps towards happiness. Do you remember we talked about perfectionism? We talked about it in our last podcast as well. This is a myth where you're trying to always be perfect, right? If I can only be this. And I discussed how important it is for us not to have unrealistic expectations, because that puts so much stress on us. Where happiness is this road. So start taking these small steps and start to accept even your imperfections. Stop comparing yourself to others. That allows you to grow. If only I was just more skinnier, if I was just, if I had more meat on me. But all of that is really leading you to a wrong path. Perfectionism is only a sign that something's going on. When we want to be perfect and we appear in this sense of perfection, that's really what we call pride. And pride has a tendency to hide something within. It actually fosters anxiety. It fosters self-criticism. It fosters unrealistic expectations. So really think about that. We also discussed taking small steps in not necessarily looking for the approvals of everybody. When you try to find external validation, constantly trying to find people to just applaud you, or it makes you feel good, right? When you have the approval of others and you're looked upon in this, wow, she's amazing or he's amazing. And we think, oh, that makes me feel happy. But in reality, it's only leading you to comparison and stress. It's only leading you to a false connection, because you're looking for love through external validation, and you're pursuing something that's not leading you to happiness. This is very important, because how often have we looked for ways for people to be very happy with us? We can't please everybody. And when we find ourselves trying to approve and be approved by others, it's just like a dopamine hit. And we may feel happy for the moment, but in long term, it leads us to unhappiness. Another one that we talked about is taking small steps in understanding that you're not going to find happiness in performance, in attaining, in grasping for more and more and more. If I just had this, if I just had that. The pursuit of more actually is something that our culture teaches us, but all that's going to do is lead us to comparisons. This isn't instant gratification. Keep in mind, instant gratifications that make you feel like it's happiness and it makes you feel like, oh, I'm so happy. That's only leading you to unhappiness. These are subtle messages that we have in our mind, right? And we see it in advertisement. We see it in media. We see it everywhere we turn. And we have this idea that happiness is this, or if I only had that, but it's really misplaced happiness. We're seeking happiness in the wrong places. This podcast, I hope you can go back in all the series of happiness that we've been talking about and just really listen to it again and again and again. And as you do, start evaluating, start looking within, start, right, just kind of looking at your life in terms of, where do I have these small myths? Where do I have this ideas, these false messages that I've given myself? Or maybe I've picked it up from culture and I think that this is going to lead me to happiness, when in fact, it's not leading me to happiness. It's just leading me to more unhappiness. So start taking these small steps, and you'll find that these small steps, connections, not comparing yourselves, is only going to lead you into a path of happiness.